Hello, I'm going to go over how I cook one of my favorite cuts, country style ribs today. They're often overlooked in the supermarkets and people don't smoke them very often around here anymore, but they really are good and they're very inexpensive. And they're kind of a short cook. They're not one of these 12 or 15 hour cooks. So I'm going to show you kind of on the hog where they come from, and I'm even going to take you to the butcher real quick and show you how we cut them up and how they're made. Originally, they came from the Chicago area. There's a butcher named Cliff Bowes is his name, and he's kind of given the accolade for coming up with these. Basically, in the front part of the hog, when you cut it in half, you go about 4 ribs back. And those front 4 ribs, they don't have much rib meat between them, but they had all this muscle tissue on the outside. So he would cut those ribs in half lengthwise and sell them as country-style ribs. But they became very popular, and there's very few on each hog. So what they ended up doing later was actually approximating those by making them out of the Boston butt, which we know about. Makes pulled pork. It's that top part of the shoulder. So anyway, that's how 99% of the country style ribs are that you'll purchase these days. There'll be a Boston butt that's cut across that shoulder blade bone. So the neat thing about this is if you buy what are called pork steaks in the supermarket, they're going to be the day I went there, they were $3.49 a pound, and that's a Boston butt that's cut into steaks. And then if they cut those into smaller steaks or country style ribs, the price was $3.29. So you're already saving a little bit more money. But if you just bought the Boston butt itself and had them cut it up, you save the most money. Those things can go south of $2 a pound really, really quickly. So most of your butchers and most of your supermarkets will cut your meat up for you. I hope you can find one that does, because a Boston butt cut into steaks is country style ribs. And so anyway, I have a video here, and we'll get started. I kind of explain right off how all this works. If you have the hog, there's the back and the ham back there and the tail. This front part here, this shoulder, can be divided into 3 cuts: the Boston butt, the picnic roast, and the hock, or the shank. So again, that shoulder itself, whenever you dissect it, it has the same bones that we have in our arm. There's that Boston butt with the picnic and the hock. That's the shoulder. So at the top is the scapula or shoulder blade. And you know when you cook a Boston butt, that's the part that you pull out, that Y-shaped bone right there with a big ridge on it. And then, of course, the humerus attaches to that, just like in your arm. And below that are the ulnus and the radius. And so whenever they butcher these into roasts, they cut it about right here, and it cuts that shoulder blade bone in half. So a little bit of that shoulder blade bone is on the middle portion, which is the picnic. But the top is what we call the Boston butt, and then the picnic shoulder, and then the hock, or the shank. Now, if you were to take that Boston butt and cut it like this into little steaks, you go through that bone each time, and that leaves a portion of bone inside the cut. So a diagram of that cut would look like this, and there's this little portion of the bone in there, and that's the scapula. But this is a country style rib, and of course it's surrounded by these different muscle groups. It's really a very complicated piece of meat. There's lots of muscle groups, and it's very tough. So we will be employing a braise today, just like we would with a Boston butt. So that's kind of how where they come from. I get a lot of questions about what is a country style rib. Some people, when they talk about cooking ribs, this is all they're talking about. Remember earlier I was talking about Cliff Bowes. What he did is, if you were to cut the hog right here, which is where the butchers do, it leaves about 4 ribs out in front of there. There's some ribs there, but these front 4 ribs right in that area there in the front, that's where they used to take them from. There just weren't enough. So they started employing this method of cutting up a Boston butt. And that's where we get our country style ribs today. So I hope that kind of helps. The inside of an animal gets really confusing unless someone can draw it for you. So there's a Boston butt that I picked out, and he took it out of the package for me. And basically now, turn this down a little bit. Basically now he's going to cut this into what I asked for 1.5 inch cuts. So he's going to cut these into 1.5 inch. Those are pork steaks. That was the most expensive that you can pay for the Boston butt, is in a pork steak. And then he cuts them in half, and now they're country style ribs. Almost all supermarkets have these. Sometimes they come prepackaged to places like Walmart, but most butchers, of course, cut these and offer them. And if they don't, surely they offer a bone-in Boston butt that you can have your butcher process just like I just did. So there they are. I brought them home. We're going to go ahead and dry brine them. I'm going to use Payne County Bird. And of course, this is my poultry and pork seasoning. Any poultry or pork seasoning will work. Both pork and poultry, you can use the same kind of seasonings on almost all the time. I think they have the similar fats inside there or something like that because the seasonings just work on both animals really well. So I'm going to get these nice and covered up with seasoning and let them sit for a few hours in dry brine. You can let them sit overnight like this. Some of the salinity from the salt will go into the product. And then while we're doing that, we'll get the smoker ready and stuff like that. But these are all good and rubbed and ready to sit for a while. I'm cooking on an Oklahoma Joe's small porch model offset today. And today I'm lighting it with, like usual, paper towels and cooking oil. When I run out of used cooking oil, I think it's just time to make hot wings again because I use that oil to light my fires, the used vegetable oil that I cook buffalo wings in. But it makes a great way to start a charcoaler is with oil and a little bit of paper towel. It wicks in there, and you've seen me do this in other videos. I pour a little bit on top down through the coals also. And man, it makes a hot fire really fast. And it's a good way to use that used vegetable oil. I keep a separate pail with small chunks for my offset. You know, there's no reason to have a 16-inch log and try and get it into your offset cooker. So I actually chop them up, and I have this separate pail for it. And I like to go ahead and put one, as you see me do in other videos, I like to put a piece on top to go ahead and get it burning really hot while the charcoal is catching. This is oak we're using today. You can use oak, pecan, or hickory interchangeably if they're seasoned well and dry. If they're still wet, I can taste a difference, or I claim I can anyway. But when they're dry like this, it's really hard to tell the difference. So we'll let our smoker come up to temperature. We're going to be cooking about 275 today, a little warmer than usual. That's what I like to cook country-style ribs at, though. And like always, I'm going to brush this grate down really hard with a nylon bristle brush. Polish it off really well, and then oil it up with some pan release. Just buy the cheap stuff and wipe it down with a paper towel, and it's all ready to go. Basically, we're just going to arrange these guys in here. And we're going to go 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours, I think, or in between there somewhere to get enough smoke on there. There's no reason to spray them or anything because the bark just sets about 2 hours. So we're going to leave these at about 275 degrees for a couple hours. It's a quick smoke. You know, 2.5 hours of smoke, 2.5 hours in the oven or in the smoker as a braise, and you're ready to go. It's a pretty fast cook compared to most barbecue. And there they are, all smoked up, but they're not tender yet. So we'll put them in a large foil pan, or you can do this in 2 small foil pans, or you can just do half this many ribs in 1 foil pan if you're doing an offset smoker. And then I like to put a probe into the deepest part of one of those suckers, just like that. Cover it with butter. This is 2 sticks right out of the fridge. I think this adds a richness, of course, to these, but I do notice the flavor, so I do this. And then I foil it up for the braise at 275. Takes about 2.5 more hours, and as you can see, the sun's going down. These ribs are at about 147 degrees right now. So it's going to be after dark when we pull these off. That's okay. The evenings are finally starting to get cool here in Oklahoma. October is in a few more days. It's very into September. So here it is. They are 207 degrees, which means it is time to pull them out. You can check for tenderness if you like with that probe at about 205, 206, 207. That's when Boston butt usually starts to get tender and the collagen is broken all the way down into gelatin. So what we're going to do with these is go ahead and glaze them. They're so soft at this point that I do have difficulty get them out of here. You can see I'm using these big 16-inch OXO Good Grips. That's my favorite tong to use. They're just so soft. And all that juice down there isn't just butter. That's a lot of that water that the Boston butt exudes. If you've ever cooked a Boston butt, you know how much liquid it can make. That pretty mahogany color they have. And I'm going to use my own Hogsbane barbecue sauce on these. Any sweet sauce should work at this point. They're salty and they're smoky. Pork, in my opinion, needs a sweet barbecue sauce glaze over it. And I like to just squirt it on there or brush it on with a brush and let it sit about 20 or 30 minutes in the smoker, and it'll harden up and tighten up on there and make a good glaze for these country style ribs. They're a very rich cut. They have a lot of connective tissue and gelatin, of course, in them. But man, they are just so good. They really are a meat that's overlooked quite often. People cook Boston butt all the time, but they have no idea that you can cook them this way, and sometimes a lot quicker. Like I said, it's about a 5-hour cook. I like to cover every little part that I can. There's a lot of ribs in here. I should have sped this part up for you guys, but who doesn't like watching a bunch of barbecue sauce dressed over meat? So here's one after I've taken them off. They sit in there about 20 more minutes, and I let them rest a little bit. I just wanted to show you guys what these look like on the inside. They're so thin that the smoke ring almost goes all the way to the center, and they're just so soft. Very, very, very hard to cut with a sharp knife like this. It almost wants to fall apart on you. These are really, really, really good. It's one of my favorite barbecue items. I like these every bit as much as I like a spare rib or a baby back rib. And they're just a showstopper. One of the cheapest cuts you can cook. One of the easiest. It's a fast cook. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with these things at all. Many of my friends cook them all the time now, and they just turn out great. So I hope you guys try them. This is a pretty quick video, but that's a pretty easy thing to cook. So I hope you'll go to your butcher, buy a Boston butt, especially when they're on sale for like $1.20 or $1.30 a pound, and have them cut into country style ribs like this. When they're on sale, I buy several at a time and throw them in the freezer, because pork is one of those meats that if you freeze it one time and then thaw it, you don't see much degradation whatsoever in the quality of the product. So anyway, that's how I cook country style ribs. I hope you guys will try them. Thank you so much for watching.